Hi, welcome to 6 Steps to a No Stress Writing Workshop. I'm Mary Pat, and in just a few minutes I'll introduce myself, but first I want to talk about why you're here. Writing instruction is challenging. Our students may be at various levels, there are so many standards to teach, and often all we feel like we're doing is grading and planning. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about Writing Workshop is because I know how challenging writing instruction is. And I also know that Writing Workshop can be a great way to reduce your stress and workload while improving your students' writing skills. So today we're going to go through the process of setting up Writing Workshop that will reduce your stress and make your planning easier. So here's what we'll be doing in this session to create No Stress Writing Workshop. Our objectives are to simplify writing instruction, to learn 6 steps for planning and using Writing Workshop that will reduce your stress. And at the end of today's session, you will have a set of ready-to-use mini lessons that you can plug into your lesson plans. Hi, I'm Mary Pat Mahoney. I'm the person behind Just Add Students blog and Teacher Pay Teacher store. I'm so excited you're with me today. I just want to give you a little background about myself. I've been a teacher all my adult life. I've taught everything from 4th grade through college. I've taught in inner city school, middle class school, affluent schools. I've been a mentor teacher, a trainer. I have been a tutor. I worked for a college board as a grader, and I also did a stint when my children were little as a grader for a high school teacher. My bachelor's degree and my master's degree are both in English, and I have a concentration in composition theory. So this subject is near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited for us to talk about it today. As we're getting started, I want to remind you that there is a note taker with the materials for this class that you can print out or you can use to take notes as we go along. It'll save you some time finding the information you need. So if you need to stop and download the note takers in the documents that are with this class, you might want to do that right now. As we're getting started, I would like you to remember to do a couple things for me. The first one is adopt. So that is adopt any of the ideas, thoughts, suggestions that we cover today's session. Adopt them to your own teaching. And then adapt. So adapt them to the needs of your students and your own style of teaching. And finally, I want to ask you to remember to adjust. So that means as you're working through Writing Workshop, adjust the lessons to meet the needs of your students and the pace that works best for them. So let's just start by having our common understanding of the definition of Writing Workshop. Writing Workshop is student-centered. It's student-centered learning where students are working on the craft of writing. And you, as the teacher, will model short mini lessons, and then the student will complete that same activity. So you'll follow a cycle of modeling and independent work. You, the teacher, are the guide on the side, and the students start where they are and work and move forward to improve their skills. They'll be taking small steps, and then they'll have quality control, which is you, the teacher, and that will equal student growth. I love this quote, "Success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out," by Robert Collier. And that's so much like what Writing Workshop is all about. So the first step is getting the buy-in, getting the students to buy in and understand what Writing Workshop is. So they're going to need to know what a workshop is in the first place. A great way to introduce this to your students is to share with them this clip from ELF, which is just fun, and they're probably familiar with it already, but it's just a fun clip. And when you just look at this picture, you see that you have the elves on either side of the table. They're working on a craft. They're creating something. You have this elf who is the manager, and then you have Buddy who is struggling to kind of find his spot. The wonderful thing about workshop that students can think about and that you can explain to students is that workshop is what real writers do. Real writers, that's hard to say, work on their craft. And this is a great opportunity for you to share with your students some stories about writers that they may know. Louis Sachar, for example, the author of Holes, wrote Holes, the entire book, and then rewrote it 4 or 5 more times before he even showed it to his family. So your students can understand that real writers work and they collaborate and they struggle and they revise. These are things real writers do, and your students are real writers. Your students also need to know how this is going to work. So you're going to want to practice and do a few run-throughs of how the workshop is going to work. Your students may be familiar with it if they've done reading workshop in the past or if they had writer's workshop in the past, but your own particular style of how you want things to go, you'll want to do a run-through with that. In the bonus materials, when you signed up for this course, you received my a sample or an example of some mini lessons already made for you that you can use to introduce writing workshop to your students. And you want to make it exciting for your students. So when you're excited, they're excited. So one of the most fun things students love to do is create their writer's notebook. So make sure you make a big deal out of the special writer's notebook that they're going to use. And again, practice your procedures so that it's easy for you to jump in and work when it's time to work and your students know what's expected of them. So what's in it for me? What's in it for you? What's in it for the teacher? What are the benefits that you're going to reap from this? You're going to keep your writing projects manageable. And if you have ever had a project that has felt like it is completely out of control, Writing Workshop is going to rein that all in. It will help you focus your lessons. You will know exactly what you're going to teach every day, and it makes it crystal clear what that is going to be. You are going to be giving your students, most importantly, real writing tools that they can carry with them from one year to the next, true growth for your students. It's super easy to differentiate when you're in Writing Workshop. You'll be able to conference with your students, and you will see increased success with your student writers. And that is something we can all be very happy about. So what tools do you need to get started? You really only need your writing standards for teaching your writing standards. And it is nice to have a timer that you can pop in your pocket so that you keep things on a tight schedule. Your students will need a writing notebook of some kind. It can be digital or it can be print, and that is about it. You're ready to go. So let's go ahead and go on to step number 2, which is getting started. Let's plan. The first thing you want to do is review your standards. What types of writing are required this year? We are going to use the 5th grade writing Common Core State Standards for this session just as an example because it's some common vocabulary that we can all use. So in 5th grade, students will be writing opinion pieces, informative explanatory pieces, narratives, short research projects, literary or informational text analysis. They're also including the writing process with these standards. And I've underlined the writing process words because those are the things we're going to focus on. So we understand this is what 5th grade is going to be writing this year. So again, planning your year, you're going to figure out what's the big picture. you want to create a rough year-long plan or a year at a glance. Now your school or your district, it may already have, your team may already have a year-long plan or year at a glance, but I just want you to take a minute to think about this and look at this. It's very broad and it's very basic. So you can divide your year up. Maybe you're in 6 weeks, maybe you do quarters, and you can just plot out when you're going to teach what. And so I like to start with narrative writing because narrative writing is usually most accessible for students. They're familiar with it, it's comfortable, and it's a fun place to start the year, fun way for you to get to know your student writers. And then you can plot out the rest of your writing here. You may think, wow, that's a ton of time to spend on just one writing task. But remember, you're going to be training your students how to use Writing Workshop. And even if they had Writing Workshop last year, you want to train them so that they are following your classroom procedures and what you want them to do. And also you have imagined real narrative was in your standards, so you can actually repeat this writing process with a real event or an imaginary event. So you won't have any problems keeping this lively. Okay, but wait, what are they going to write about? Okay, this is a question. Some teachers have problems with it. You may have a favorite writing assignment that you want your students to write about. That's okay. Your students can also pick their own topics. That's okay too. You're going to work with what you're comfortable with. Personally, I don't like reading the same type of writing over and over again, so I allow students to pick their topic as long as it's narrative writing, and I say real or imagine there, and you do plenty of brainstorming. And again, if you look at the bonus material, you'll see some ways for some mini lessons where you'll help your students develop some ideas that they can write about. But if you really have a topic that you've had a lot of success with and that you love, by all means, keep that topic. Don't feel like you have to throw everything away and start all over again from scratch. So we're ready to go on to number 3. Third step is, what am I going to teach? So you're going to look at your standards for one writing task. Here's the narrative writing tasks right here. The first one, and then these are all the supporting tasks. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to look at this very first task, writing task here. And what we're going to do is we're going to frame our unit. So we are going to look at this and we're going to take it apart to see what exactly I'm supposed to be doing with this narrative. I can see I've got these commas, and that's going to help me figure out what my elements are. So I can see I have 4 big teaching points. They are write a narrative, use effective technique, use descriptive details, and use clear event sequences. And I know that some of these things are going to be addressed in those supporting standards. So let's take a look at those. So now I'm going to start creating a detailed list of my mini lessons using my standards. So here's my frame that I created. And I've already done this first one, so I'm going to check that one off. So now I'm ready to do my second supporting standard. And I can see, thankfully, by this semicolon that I have 2 chunks here. Orient the reader. And by establishing a situation and introducing a narrator, I think I'm looking at this and I say, well, I orient the reader in an introduction. So I'm going to want to put this somewhere in my frame. I feel comfortable putting it up here at the beginning because I want my students to work on an introduction, and I want to call it an introduction. So I am going to write introduction here where I'm going to orient the reader, and I'm going to write this. You can always write your standard numbers on here too to help you remember which standard you're teaching. The next standard I'm looking at is organize a sequence that unfolds naturally. It feels like it's going to go up here. It's going to be one of these bigger, see how these go narrow, and this is bigger. These are more general things I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to plop that one in there. I'm going to say organize my events. So I finished that second one. Now quickly we're going to go through the third, And so you can see this next standard has 3 parts to it as well: dialogue, description, and pacing. So I've decided I want to put my dialogue under effective technique, because effective technique could be anything. And as a matter of fact, this standard says such as. So if you have a more advanced students and you want to teach foreshadowing, or if you want to teach flashback, by all means, you can add those. But because I'm a busy teacher, I'm going to focus on the standard as written with dialogue, description, and pacing. And then maybe if I teach this a second round, I can add something a little more advanced. So effective technique is really vague. I'm going to specify I want to add dialogue. So I'm going to add effective technique for dialogue. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my descriptive details, and that's right here, description, using descriptive details. And then I'm going to add my pacing, effective pacing. Now, you also have these last 3 standards, which I'm not going to go through because you probably get the idea of how this is all going to work. And through the magic of the internet, I've got them all done for you. So here are the 14 standards that I determined I could use in mini lessons. But wait, there is more, because we have these standards, which are the writing process standards, which are also included. So we want to make sure that we get these mini lessons in. And these are such a wonderful standard to look at, because they will come up every time you teach writing. You always want to be teaching. These are the toolbox, some of the standard toolbox writing activities. You want your students to know how to do these things. And so every single time you teach, when you add these, you're strengthening their ability to their writing skills. So I'm going to be adding some of these into my list. So I added my pre-writing planning here, and I am going to tell where I'm going to write my sloppy copy. So I've decided that's where I'm going to write my sloppy copy. I've added my revising. And then I'm going to add my editing, peer review, and publishing down here. So my list is looking pretty good. I've got 19 mini lessons to help me teach narrative writing. But I'm still not quite finished, because I want to go to that adapt and adjust, and I want to adapt and adjust my list to meet my needs. So I know that I want to start, my first lesson is going to be to ask, what is a narrative and what is narrative writing? And I want to provide my students with mentor texts and anchor charts. So I'm going to add that to my list. And then I've decided I don't need this second one, write a narrative. That's not really a mini lesson. That's the task of the entire standard. So I'm going to cross that one out. And I also split up my introduction, because I felt like, I want to have more time where my students can work on their introduction. So I'm going to give them 2 days for my introduction. And of course, you can do the same. You can add, extra time here. So you're adapting it and adjusting it to your needs and your student needs. So on to step number 4. In step number 4, you are going to plot out your lessons. And this probably looks really familiar to you because it's a unit planning chart. And you're going to just put your mini lessons in however long you want your unit to last. So you're going to see some cool things. I think these are cool things. You're going to see some connections. So this week here, if you look at the mini lessons, week number 3 can be detail week, because all of these things are looking at getting specific details, concrete words, sensory details. So this whole theme of this week number 3, you could just really focus in on descriptive details, and details that can be just detail week all week long. You also are going to see that you're going to have some cycling in your unit, which is also fantastic. Pacing and sequencing, those connect. So It's wonderful because when you get down to sequencing, you're referencing the students back to their pacing lessons, and so you're reinforcing these skills. And of course, we have this lovely little grammar review here with phrases. You're going to need to review, of course, here what's a phrase, and then your students are going to review again what a phrase is. So plotting your lessons can really have some great, you can look at it overall and find some really great ways to make connections between the lessons. And also you want to plug in some work days. So I plugged in 4 work days here where you feel your students might need a little extra work. It's great to have a catch-up day. It's great if you have any problems with scheduling, if you have, if you're going to have any interruptions. It's nice to have a catch-up day. So let's get started teaching. What's going to happen here? You've probably seen this cycle of a mini lesson. You're going to start your this is the cycle for writing workshop, sorry, not mini lesson. You're going to start your mini lesson. You're going to have a 10-minute, maybe 15-minute mini lesson. This is where you're going to use your timer because you want to stay right on task. And then you are going to go to, after you've modeled your lesson, your students are going to work independently for the majority of the time. And that might be 5 to 20 minutes. Your students are going to need to work up to 20 minutes or 15 minutes. They may not at the beginning of the year be able to work more than 5 minutes. So be patient with them and help them develop that muscle and that endurance for writing for longer and longer periods of time. Also, you might have a mini lesson that doesn't require a whole lot of work on their part. If you're doing a pre-writing or if they're reviewing or creating an anchor chart, you may not have a whole lot of work for them to do. So be mindful of that. This is the time also where you can conference with your students or work the room. So you're walking around the room, you're looking over the shoulder of your students, and you are helping them if they need it, but they shouldn't need it because you've already done an excellent job of modeling them. We really want them to work independently because we want them to become independent, strong writers through this process. And then at the end, you're going to wrap up and share. That might just be a simple turn and talk. That might be an exit card. It might be where everybody shares something. Just quickly closing that circle. This is also a great way for you to kind of segue the next day. So the next day, Tuesday, you refer back to what the wrap up and share was on Monday, and that will help students remember and keep drawing those connections. So real quickly, I just wanted to talk about what your mini lesson should look like. And I'm going to give you a quick demo in a second to show you what a quick mini lesson will look like. I promise I'm not going to dance. I want to give you a quick demonstration of what a mini lesson might look like so that you have some ideas about what we're talking about today. So what I'm going to demonstrate today is this ABC list for narrative pre-writing. These are seed ideas that the students can use as they're trying to generate ideas to write about. We often know that's the hardest part, is your students will start with one idea and then they won't be able to budge off of that. So this helps generate multiple ideas for them. So I'm going to put on my teacher voice and I'm going to demonstrate. Boys and girls, we've been talking about narratives, and today we're going to be working on getting some ideas for what we might want to write about. We have talked that real writers use a writer's notebook or a journal in which they record their ideas so that in the future when they want to write something, they can go here to their ideas. And so that's what we're going to create today. Those little seed ideas that we can use to grow into a bigger narrative. So I'm going to just look at this ABC board and I'm going to see if it sparks any ideas for me. I already know that I love to write about my crazy dog, Rocco. So I am going to write that right here. He's going to get R. And I could start at A and move through, but I'm just going to look at it randomly and see what ideas kind of spark my interest. So I love the fact that the story that I can tell about going to Niagara Falls with my family. So that was a great and exciting and a little bit scary. So I can write a narrative about that. I also had a really fun birthday surprise. So I can put that, I'm going to put that down. I love family vacations. Now that is kind of vague, isn't it? But I'm going to go ahead and write it because I know that I might like to write about some of my other family vacations. So when you're practicing in our writing workshop, when you're writing and working on your craft, you are going to do the same thing. You're going to take your ABC list and you are going to generate as many different ideas as you can that you can put in your little seed list so that you'll be able to use them later on when you're looking for topics for your narrative. Let's get started. So step number 5 is to plan for fast finishers. And this can be a big issue if you have students that work at various rates, which of course they will. So the first thing you want to do is remember no busy work, because that is not something that we want to include in our classroom anyway. And also our students will quickly see that it's busy work and then they will be bored. We want to keep them writing. One way you can do that is by adding your writing warm-up, your whole class writing warm-up. Instead of at the beginning of your class, you can have this be something that your students do as fast finishers. So that's an easy way. You're just kind of flipping where that is. Also, you can have your students pull a stick, journal prompts. I have a stick with just, those craft sticks with just different journal prompts on them that your students can pull and use to write in their writing notebook. They can add to their ABC idea board. Again, that's in the bonus work, the mini lessons to help you get started with writing workshop. They can add to their idea pages that you want to make sure that they're going to keep writing, and they should be working in their writing notebook or their writing composition book or whatever you decide to have them use. Some other ideas include reading. If you teach reading as well, you can have students read their independent reading book. They can work on vocabulary or word work if you have something that's ongoing that they can work on. Not homework, but something that's fun that they like to do, like, making a cartoon out of a vocabulary word or doing word art. Or some other preferred activity. Again, if you teach reading and your students like to make book reports, or they're working on another project that they like that's a preferred activity. There really shouldn't be in this fast finisher activity, this fast finisher section for very long, which is why reading is really great or writing warm-ups are really great. You really don't want them in there for more than 10 minutes because then it becomes kind of boring. You want to keep the pace moving. The last element, the last step is to assess as you go. This is going to really help reduce your workload to a certain degree. You're still going to have papers you're going to be looking at, but let's be more efficient about how we do it. One way is to keep a running chart. So here's an example of a checklist that you can put on a clipboard or put on, if you want it digital, where when you are working the room, you have that clipboard with you with your students' names and tasks along the top, and you can actually assess as you go. And this can make it much, much easier for you to keep on top of the assessments, because if you get through 5, 10 students in one day, those are 5 or 10 more papers that you don't have to collect and take home and assess. As you assess as you go, the more familiar you are with your students' writing topics, your assessments will go faster. So you do want to read drafts, you want to read graphic organizers, you want to read introductions as much as you can, even if it's just a quick run through. We're going to talk about conferencing in a second, but that does help you grade faster. And then your conferences, use your conference time with students for your formative assessments as well. You also want to use a rubric and make sure it's reasonable. Let's not have a rubric that tries to score everything. Remember, you're going to have to look for all those things in that writing when you're sitting down to do your summative assessment. So make your rubric reasonable and make sure you have taught it and make sure it's reflected in your mini lessons. So some quick tips for writing conferences. Always start with what you like the best. Point out those positives in your tender young writers. Prepare for your conferences by grouping students ahead of time. So rather than having your students sign up for a conference, use your prior day's assessments, gather them all up. Sort them into piles of students who need like things. It's always amazing to me when I see, oh, this whole group of students forgot to use any punctuation, or this whole group of students forgot to write more than one sentence. So you can streamline your conferences by grouping your students. You get it's much more effective, and you'll get through students faster. Group those students according to one specific task and work at one skill at a time. Don't overwhelm them with a huge list of issues to fix. The year is long. Writing is difficult. You are going to get there. You don't have to have everything done the first time you meet with the students. You also want to model your tasks and make sure your students understand what they're supposed to be doing. You can also let them work together on a skill, check together, have that little flexibility of helping each other. And then record your notes so both you and the student understand what needs to be done. The writing notebook is the best place to keep everything in there. So when you have your own writing notebook for your class, and you're going to write down, I met with this student on this day, and we talked about this, and this is the task that they're going to do, and the students are going to write the same thing in their notebooks. It's like a diary, and you can go back and make sure you next time you conference with that student, you can go back to those notes and you can see, did we do it? Were we successful, or how did it go? So as we're wrapping up, let's talk about some frequently asked questions. How do I know how long to allot for my students to work independently? Don't just plop them into writing workshop and give them 20 minutes or 30 minutes to write because you have a 40-minute class period. Your students may not be able to do that. You're going to need to work them up to longer and longer stretches of time. So watch them. Shorter is better. Stop while you're still having fun. My students hate to write. Okay, you're going to encounter that too. Keeping those mini lessons short helps. Really celebrating their successes, sharing with them stories of authors and writers they may know who struggle to write, and letting them have a little bit of freedom in what they're writing about. That also helps. If they're writing about something they love, it will be easier for them to write. Will this work with distance learning? Absolutely. Writing workshop is drip. It's drip content. So you're going to give them one mini lesson at a time, and they're just gradually going to be working on their writing. So it's that drip content which it helps them feel successful. It's not overwhelming, and it works really well with distance learning. And what if this is taking too long? If this is torturous, your students hate their topics, you can't stand it another minute, stop. Not every single professional writer publishes every single thing that he or she writes. So if you need to stop and reset and start over again, that's fantastic. Just make sure that you have all taken a second to say, what did we learn from this process? And it's okay. You're still working on writing skills, even if your students don't take something to publication. And you can explain that to them, and students understand, and students will be the first to say, yes, I don't like writing this, or whatever. So let's look at all the 6 steps that we're following, that we're talking about. We talked about getting your students to buy in, about reviewing your standards and planning your year, breaking your standards down into those mini lessons, plotting out your unit, planning meaningful work for your fast finishers, and assessing as you go. And then you're going to just rinse and repeat. So where can you go from here? If you need help I am here for you. You can find me at justaddstudents.com. You can shoot me an email at marypat@justaddstudents.com. And or you can ask me a question through my blog. And I also write a lot about writing workshop and writing different writing products. So you can find some help there. You can reach out to me. Also, I really recommend that if you can find this in your professional library at school, Guiding Readers and Writers by Fountas and Pinnell is a great, great resource. Tons and tons of stuff in it. If you're not familiar with it, you might want to just flip through it. It can be overwhelming, but it also is a really good resource. Another resource I love is this one by Nancy Atwell, Lessons That Change Writers. She's just the queen of the mini lesson and writing workshop. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could all teach like this? But she has some great lessons in her book that you can, again, adopt, adapt, and adjust to meet your needs in the classroom. I am so happy that you were with me today, and I loved sharing writing workshop with you. I hope you will take advantage of the bonus materials that you received and the note taker that comes with this class, and that you'll let me know if there's anything I can help you with. And I wish you just such great success with your students in writing workshop. Thanks for joining me.